Now we will review second species. This is where dissonance is introduced. Dissonance is the spice of life. It's what makes music interesting. Now, all of the rules of first species still apply in second species. The counterpoint voice now moves in a 2-to-1 rhythmic ratio against the contus. So if your contus is in a whole note, your part that you're going to write will be in half notes. If we look below at the example, the contus is written in half notes, so we'll be using quarter notes, but that is still the proportion of 2-to-1 rhythmic ratio, okay? Now dissonance is introduced, but only in the form of a weak beat, unaccented passing tone. So unaccented means that it's on the weaker of the two beats in a 2-2 measure, or in a 4-4 measure, it would be either occurring on weaker beats 2 or 4, and that's what we see below here. That was letter A, here's letter B. Now let's figure out why letter A sounded more dissonant than letter B. Had more bite than this one. The reason is because you have a P8, then a 7th, moving to a P5. Whereas letter B is smoother because it doesn't really have any dissonance. It goes interval of a 6th to a 5th, and those are all constant intervals, as is the third. So letter A is an example of a dissonant passing tone, whereas letter B is the example of a consonant passing tone. We have both types, so consonant passing tones are now a thing too, but they are not nearly as interesting or edgy as the dissonant ones. Now, the example below comes out of the Lates textbook, and this is a mixture of both consonant and dissonant passing tones. And the dissonant ones are marked by the little star, and you can see by the numbers, anything that's numbered a 2 or a 4, those are dissonant intervals, okay? So, here's your contus note, here's the written part. You may choose to sing whatever is comfortable in your voice. Ready? Go! All right, just a few things to point out. This one's fairly easy. You notice how the interval numbers are written down the center so that you can see where the dissonant pitches are. You have to make sure that you calculate these correctly on your first pass through. You'll also notice that the penultimate measure, the next to the last bar, does not have 2 half notes in it. It just has a single half note. That is allowable in second species. I'll start 3 bars before the end. Since you're in the place that you want to be, 6, going to 8, you can change the note value to a half note there. If it works out, you could also have 2 half notes there if it worked out. But just so you know that having a whole note in the penultimate bar is a possibility. And your numbers in second species at the end should always end with the interval of a 6 moving to an 8. That is the numbers that work for the cadence point that you want. Also, you may either start in second species with a half note like this exercise did, or you can start with a rest and then come in on the second half note instead if you want. Now we introduce oblique motion. So in addition to parallel, similar, and contrary, now we have oblique. Oblique means you have a note held with pitches changing against it. So look at the bottom. So one voice moves while the other stays stationary. So this comes out of the Lates textbook as well. So we have a 5, that's oblique down to the 3. Now they both move up, so this is parallel, oblique, there's contrary, oblique, contrary, oblique, similar. Now this is not the end of the exercise because it didn't end on do, so we're just probably looking at the first 5 bars of an exercise. Now, just as in first species, you cannot have PP1s, PP5s, or PP8s on successive downbeats. They are too strong. So in first species, letter A would sound like this, because he would just be playing the first pitches of every bar. Well, my friends, there is no counterpoint if you're just playing octaves. there's no counterpoint there. It's just a wide open space. So now I'm going to fill it in with second species, but you'll still hear the octaves being very strong on downbeats. So that's not good. Okay? Now the same thing applies in letter B with fifths. If I just play the downbeats, that's pretty strong. Even if I fill them in with 5, 6, 5, 3, you still hear those very strong P5s, and that's not good to have those on successive downbeats either. Now look at letter C. You've got the intervals of 5, 6, 5, 6. Now those are both consonant intervals, but you still have 5s on downbeats. So 5 to 6 is not good either, but letter D, where you have 6 to 5, is perfect because now you have 6s on downbeats. So letter D sounds like this. Those are good strong beat parallel sixths. All right, so again, do not have perfect intervals on successive downbeats of measures that are next to each other. Now, avoid parallel and direct intervals. These are the hidden intervals on the weak beats. So you'll hear this. You have 8, 5 to a 5, and then 8 to an 8. So you just had two parallel perfect fifths next to each other, as well as two PP8s. 5, 5, 8, 8. That's not good. Now let's look at letter B. I don't know why Lates put this in the textbook, because when we get to the second bar, you'll see that the implied hidden fifth between the B, and I penciled in an F up there. Technically that's a diminished fifth and not a perfect fifth, but again, probably the sources that we have from the 16 and 1700s don't agree on what kind of fifths constitute parallel fifths. So this example is 8, 3, 3, 6 to 5. But whatever, we can still hear that moving from 6 to 5 was rough here because the soprano did not move in stepwise motion. Gap. So if you fill it in, technically that is a diminished fifth, not a P5, but Lates is also avoiding not to do that either. Make the G in the soprano, rewrite it so that it would not skip down a third into the E, but it would go by step. Now, here's how you begin and end second species. On a perfect 8, on the downbeat, or rest. Either of those is fine. Okay, now let's look at letter B, how you end it. So it's 8, 3, 5, 6, 8. Okay, and you can see you have mi, sol, la, ti, do, and re, do on the bottom. Or this next one next to it where it says or is more common. It's preferred actually. This is like a common lick in second species, where you have a whole note on the penultimate bar. Okay, now let's talk about the issue in minor. If you're in a minor mode, and this example is not starting at the beginning because it's starting at a 6, so this is probably in the middle of the exercise approaching the ending. Here comes la, ti, do. When you go to cadence at the end, and you know you have to have ti, do, if la directly precedes ti, then well, it would have been lay. If lay directly precedes ti, you have to raise it to la so that you don't get the augmented interval of A flat to B natural. So that's why it's A natural, la, ti, do. Because we don't use augmented and diminished intervals. So A flat to B natural is an augmented second, and that's why we have to raise it to A natural. And we're done with a quick review of first and second species now. So far, so good. Hang in there.